Hello everybody and welcome to WTS 237 What's the Story podcast. Great crack. My name is Danny Murray.
My name is Graham Merrigan and Dublin is green and white.
Would you behave yourself please, will you?
Thank you.
Behave yourself please.
How are you, Danny?
Yeah, I'm doing good, Graham. I'm doing good. Bank holiday weekend, which is always a good thing. So I'm delighted with that. I have 2 chocolate orange twiddles in me press downstairs, and I'll be absolutely stuffing them in my face with a cup of tea at some point over the next day or two.
I have a salted caramel M&M bar that I've never tried.
I didn't know M&M's had ventured into the world of salted caramel.
Neither did I until I seen it in Dunn's.
Yeah, it turns out our chocolate conversation with the lovely Brianna Parkins last week flirted with controversy. An awful lot of people responded to me saying, "How dare you suggest chocolate goes in the fridge?" I mean, it's a fantastic.
I didn't suggest that.
No, you didn't. But if you,
do you?
Yeah. So a few people have been on to me. Shauna Lauder being one of them, friend of the show, and she said chocolate doesn't belong in the fridge. I'm just not having that.
But Shauna's a wise woman.
She undisputed wisdom.
Absolutely.
Except for in the world of chocolate. So
I wouldn't always put chocolate in the fridge. My brother does. You
stop now. You're just trying to curry favour with that contrarian lot that have been on to me. There's a few other people there, and then there's people then who were on our side and couldn't believe Brianna wouldn't embrace the Irish sun, especially with the weekend that we had last week.
The weekend that was in it.
But look, that's all last week's episode. This week's episode.
Do you know what I love saying, Danny? Sorry to put it across you. I text our mate Barry, and I'd say,
Dude.
I might get, just for, I can't remember what I'd said, but I might jump in and get a chocolate bar with the day that's in it. And he'll write, what day is it? And I was like, Friday.
Where's the story going, Graham?
That's it. I love saying with the day that's in it.
Oh.
But there's no day that's in it.
No.
Sorry, I hyped that up. It was my own entertainment and my own giggles.
That's quite all right. That's quite all right.
Sorry, Dublin's green and white and I got giddy. Sorry.
Can you behave yourself, Graham, please? If you say it again,
Danny.
If you say it again, I'm beeping it out now. You've been warned. The Broadcasting Standards Authority will be on to us over such filth that you're putting out there. Need a haircut myself, Meryl. Need a haircut myself. But look, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that next week because our guest this week's a doozy.
Who is he?
Doozy.
Hat-trick hero.
Hat-trick hero indeed. Yeah, a man who, if you're not following him on Twitter, he's always good crack on Twitter. Great value on Twitter. David
He has a great podcast.
He does indeed, yeah. At David McW on Twitter, lads, if you're not already following him. His own podcast, absolutely sensational, the David McWilliams podcast. Brilliant. Himself and John run a good ship. I would thoroughly recommend it. But just, this is his hat-trick appearance. We had him on once before many years ago. Mero was sick, so it ended up just me and him. Then we welcomed him back for a live show, and that was great crack as well in the Workman's Club many years ago. And now we're all reunited through the magic of Zoom. So let's get to it with the one and only David McWilliams. Delighted to welcome back to the podcast now. It's been far too long. But
Hat-trick hero.
Hat-trick hero indeed, yeah. Broadcaster, economist, now famous podcaster as well, author. The brilliant
Shamrock Rovers fan.
Shamrock Rovers fan. This is the. Well, of course, lads, it's a pleasure to be on the original. What's the Story? The original podcast. You guys have been doing this a long, long time ago.
Too long, some would say. Too long.
Not at all.
We're not just the pandemic podcast.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, on that one, Mero, there's a great Australian clip advising people not to do a podcast, right? And it's really funny. I'll send it to you. It's on YouTube. Just if you Google it, don't do a podcast. It's an Australian comedian thing, and it's priceless. But yeah, look, as you know, you start doing it, and then people listen to it, and then you can't stop.
Yeah, that's it. But in fairness, you've taken over the podcast scene in Ireland. It's brilliant, and congratulations, because it's the stuff you're putting out. It's brilliant, man. So,
thank you, Danny. It's it's just it's economics, but look, as you know, in the podcast, you can go anywhere,
Yeah.
and you can explore anything. Whereas, when I would be doing TV stuff, it's much more. It's more of a joust, and there's a sort of a scrap going on, and there's lots of agendas that usually on television you're not aware of until they're over. And
Right.
whereas in the podcast, you can just take it. I'd say to John, we do Russia or China or economics or the housing market, and we just go with it. It's
You
great.
simplify economics though, Dave, don't you? You simplify it's like Luke O'Neill is like you of the kind of virologist world, immunology.
I would take that as a big compliment, because he's a brilliant explainer. I mean, I also like the way nothing with Luke O'Neill is ever intimidating. Like
Absolutely.
he has an amazing way of kind of suckering you into his to his world, and he's kind of like, I would have been somebody who would have found immunology and virology and all that really alien, and half an hour listening to Luke or 10 minutes, you're like, oh, I get this. I know what he's talking about. But and he's done an amazing job for science in Ireland at making it accessible to everybody, because it is tricky. And no more than in economics, there's lots of fellas now who would be very happy to make it very, very complicated, the sense of their own brilliance. Whereas I think what Luke does is he just tries to say, look, this is not so complicated, but it is difficult, and you have to listen up for a while. So I'll take that as a great compliment, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have to ask, Dave, anyone who's listened to your podcast will have heard you over the last little while referencing a Vespa.
Oh, it's outside. It's outside.
Did you make the most of the good weather, did you?
Deep down in this Economist, there's a 1980s mod trying to get out some days. Okay? Because my mother was so strict, she wouldn't allow me to be a punk. So I had to join some gang in Dunleary, Monkstown neck of the woods. And the mods, we could actually, we could listen to the jam and still, come home without our mothers roaring at us. So years ago, then when I got bigger, I bought a Vespa in London when I lived in London, and I always loved them. And then when I came back home to Ireland, for whatever reason, I left it, or actually it got robbed. They actually got robbed the night before we moved out of London. It was going to be put on the big truck and was going to be brought home. So it got robbed. And then Sharon said, look, we've got young kids, and maybe they're too dangerous, because she had images of me with, a 5-year-old in the back of them, or whatever. Anyway, the long and the short of it was up until, and then I had a COVID pandemic crisis. I had one of those moments that I was really holding it together, and I was being the dad of the house, and it was all fine. And it must have been, about 3 months ago. So, a year into the pandemic, I just had one of those, that's it, I can't fucking believe it. Yeah. One of those Thursday night things. And in the middle of the night, I was cross with everybody. And I was waking up, and then I said, you know what I'll do? I'll buy a Vespa. So it was a spur of the moment, COVID-inspired, frustrating midlife crisis. And it's a thing of beauty. It's outside. And the problem is, I'd ordered it. And because of Brexit, it took ages to come over. And I bought it, I took purchase of it, I think about 4 or 5 weeks ago tomorrow. And it has been freezing ever since. Right? And they're cold yolks on it. So that's the problem. So I'm waiting for the, La Bella Luna, the Italian sort of weather to kick in. And then I'll be up to the brack in the Vespa.
Be careful up there, though. That's the only thing I'll say. Lads are quite fond of Vespas up there.
Yeah. And it's a shiny new one as well.
Oh, look. Yeah.
No. But you're right, they do get robbed all the time.
Yeah.
Because they're like little toys.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And they're great fun. They're a laugh. Like you'd whir around the place with them.
Well, that's Dunleary. Dunleary seems like it would lend itself perfect, because in many ways, when the sun is shining in Dunleary, I just think of the continent. You know what I mean? And all those cities and all those narrow streets and everything else. And
Dunleary's changed dramatically, even in the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, I've seen this profound change for the better in the town, particularly down around the sea and the cycle lanes and everything. But it's interesting, the pandemic, the way, I don't know if have either of you been in town recently? in the city?
No.
Yeah, I was 2 weeks ago. Yeah,
It's very strange, isn't it?
yeah. I was in Stephen. I was at an appointment in the Eye and Ear Hospital, and I went to Stephen's Green.
Yeah.
And this is a Thursday at about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and it was incredibly eerie.
Yeah.
It was just, there was nothing going on, and it was a lovely day. People were leaving the offices to go for walks, and I remember texting my mum saying, "I'm in Stephen's Green. It's crazy."
Yeah. No, well, that's what I was thinking. Like, so if you contrast the vibrancy of somewhere like Dunleary now, which is always jammed, even up in Georgia Street, which isn't, well, let's just say it's not a destination, Georgia Street. You wouldn't be saying, "Oh, I'd be going to Georgia," but there's life here. Whereas in town, and this is something I think the state has to get a grip of very quickly, that cities can actually go bad very quickly, and they can become dilapidated very quickly and derelict very quickly. And there's no building work going on. Lots and lots of the shop fronts are boarded up. There's a real sense of the city sort of drifting badly towards dereliction. And I think the state's got to get its act together. Whereas when you come down here, there's a mate of mine, another fellow who from Monkstown was brought beside me, called David Larkin, who bought the, what's the name of that lovely hotel just there on the seafront in Dunleary? The one with the
Haddington Green.
Yeah, Haddington. And I was talking to him, and he said, look, and he'd done lots of different jobs in London, and he came back, and he said, like, his gamble is that towns like Dunleary, there's loads of them all around Dublin, will benefit enormously from the fact that people are not going to go back to work. They're not going to go back full-time into an office commuting. There's going to be this blended week. And why wouldn't you stay out here if you could and go for a stroll or go for God forbid, a swim, which is not my thing, but clearly I'm the only person in the whole world who doesn't walk around with a dry robe on, involved in guerrilla warfare down at the 40 foot. But it's nice.
What can they do, say, David? Say with the, you're saying Georgia Street and stuff in Dunleary and the shopping centre and that road and stuff. Like, it seems that it has been neglected for so long. And I haven't been in the shopping centre for years, but I remember getting a bit of I was taken aback at how empty it was.
It's completely empty.
It's completely, what can they do to rejuvenate that?
Well, I think the shopping centre should be knocked down.
Really?
Yeah, I think the shopping centre's gone. I think that approach to shopping is over. Driving in to a box where you go around. I mean, I spent a lot with John, who does the podcast with me. A lot of our misspent youth was spent running away from security guards and nogginers, actually. I don't know what was more scary, nogginers or security guards, when we were kids, right? But I think Georgia Street, if you could convert some of the shops, if you think about retail now, like, one of the big changes, again, the pandemic is online shopping. This is not going to change. So you think, what will shops become in the future? Like mainstream shops, they'll just become like websites that they won't store their stuff in the back. What they'll have is it's almost like a front of office website. So people go and say, "Oh, I wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't buy that." They'd say, "Yeah, we'll have it in stock for you, and we'll deliver it to you." Right? That's what I think is the future. So then you take somewhere like Dunleary, and you think, okay, you could repurpose at least half of the buildings in Georgia Street to residential. It's a great place to live. It would be a lovely, lovely place to live. It's got buses, it's got the Dart, it's got the seafront, it's got everything. And over the shop as well, encourage people to live there. So what you have is you have a living street. I mean, the key to all urban regeneration is people, right? And we spent from the 70s in this country, 60s, 70s to now, having a war on people in urban areas, right? So we'll take everybody out, we'll put everybody into estates, we'll take them out of the urban areas, and we'll put into the urban areas cars and shops. And now what you really realize is that, like, Dunleary just needs maybe 2,000 or 3,000 people living in the centre, right? More people. Because if you go up beyond, I mean, this is very parochial for people, if you go up to the Dominican Convent and up Convent Road, I mean, there's loads and loads of activities, lots of people around. But the main street needs people. And I think that's the future. I think it would be a great place to live. As for the shopping centre, knock it down, some sort of blended housing, social housing, apartments, whatever you want to do, but get people back in. And then you've got life. And then that's what I think is the key to all. Same in Bray, same in all these towns.
It's mad though, because like you said there, the whole thing, you don't see people living above shops anymore at all, or else you see what were homes and they're now solicitor offices or they're dentists, all that kind of thing. You don't see that kind of hub of activity anymore. And Dunleary Shopping Centre, I mean, we were saying like a Saturday for me on the weekends was
walking around.
Exactly, and then you'd get fed up, and you'd walk home because you'd spent your bus fare at McDonald's or whatever, and you'd have a football, so you'd kick the football up through Dalkey and all the way back up to the Brack. But I mean, the last time I was in Dunleary Shopping Centre was before. I'm living in Laois now, so I don't get up that far to it. I know, it's a terrible thing. Yeah.
Whereabouts in Laois are you?
I'm in Portlaoise. Yeah.
Right, that's a long way out.
It is, yeah. My partner's family lived down this way, so when we were buying, just like a lot of people couldn't afford to live up that end. So,
but Portlaoise is the youngest town in Ireland. Did you know that?
I didn't know that, and looking at the population, I wouldn't have guessed it.
Portlaoise in the last census has the highest proportion of under 10s in the country. It's also one of the most ethnically diverse towns in Ireland.
Yeah.
In terms of different immigration, different immigrants. And it's, these are the sort of stupid things I end up knowing, you know?
Yeah.
Well, that's it. I have to say, it's definitely...
They're interesting things.
It's definitely a diverse place, and it's great in a way, because like a lot of the little cafes down here and a lot of shops and all that, they're culturally different. My missus is, well, I mean, she's lived here since she was 6 or something, but she's Russian, so there's Russian shops and that kind of thing around here.
Yeah.
But I didn't realise about the number of kids that are under 10.
How's your Russian, Danny?
Yeah, hard to show.
Well, listen, hard to show is hard to show.
Yeah, well, that's you know. But my Russian, ploha, I think would be the best word for it. Yeah.
Is your missus speak Russian to her family and everything?
Yeah. And for 10 years, I've been trying to join in, and so far, all I've got is sosiska, barsuk, pizdiets, pajalusta kind of thing.
That sounds.
What's that? Can I go to the toilet?
No, that would be like, so g'day toilet is where's the toilet. That was a very important one for me to learn.
Pretty
much, yeah. But yeah, a lot of 10-year-olds. I would hold out hope for a decent football team. They all play GAA down here, so
yeah. You see the GAA. I don't know about you. I don't get it.
You're amongst friends here, Dave. You're amongst friends.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to Croke Park for a match, and to be honest with you, I've left going, it's a lot of fuss about nothing to me now. You know what I mean? But,
I like hurling. I do like hurling.
I could watch it, but I don't think I like it.
I can watch it, but I mean, I don't know. It's really. I think it's a sign of a true man from the borough is you don't really get GAA.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah,
we can't say that too loudly. You know what I mean?
I know, yeah.
Not with the middle class rising of Pula.
Well, I mean, I wrote a whole thing about it because I was amazed the last time Coola, when I was a kid, Coola was leased by Dalkey United. The pitch was leased to them, right? And as my father said, they'd never do it the other way. The football lads would lease it, the Gaelic lads wouldn't lease it. But I was very intrigued that they were sponsored by Davy Stockbroker, right? And I thought,
they were.
Isn't that correct? So Coola are sponsored by a corrupt stockbroker, right? And I just thought that's very strange because when we were kids, that would only have been a rugby team would have been sponsored by a stockbroker, only, right? And and that's. There's also another. Here we go on a tangent. About 20 years ago, a very interesting paper was written by a sociologist from Galway, a guy called Cummings, I think was his name. And he's trying to figure out which people in Ireland had done best out of free education, right? Very interesting, right? And he identified that the sons of small farmers from East and South Galway were the most upwardly mobile people in the whole country, right? This is fascinating stuff. And because he got the data and the leading cert and who did it. So basically, he was trying to make the point that the kids of small farmers who were very poor in the 60s, in contrast to the kids of industrial workers who were also quite poor. So he said, how did those two generations do? And what you find is the kids of the small farmers did incredibly well and really availed of free education. Kids of industrial workers did not. Then the kids of the small farmers became teachers, right? Okay. And they went into the civil service, those kids who did well. And their kids became doctors, right? And their kids play hurling and Kula. That this is the fascinating thing, right? Because I was thinking, who are these people? Because they didn't exist when I was a kid, right? Who are these people that are playing hurling in a team that is sponsored by that stockbroker, Davy. And in actual fact, what they are is they're the third generation beneficiaries of free education. And that's their, so they all came up here, but they brought their games with them. And East and South Galway, the game is hurling, right? And that's who they are in the main, which is kind of amazing.
You know, that is mad, isn't it?
That's fascinating.
That's fascinating, yeah.
It is fascinating. And then what you'll see is that in the next generation, talking about your kids, Danny, people will say, who are those kids? Like, where are those Portlaoise people? Who are those Portlaoise people? And what you'll find is that they're grandchildren of people from Dún Laoghaire. And that's what I love about economics. It explains things. Like when you're trying to explain what happened to the rugby playing doctor elite of South Dublin, where did they go? And who replaced them? They were replaced by a GA playing doctor elite, medical and lawyer elite. And those people were the kids and grandkids of small farmers who were the first beneficiaries of free education in the 60s. I like that sort of stuff, you know?
Yeah, it's
Mad.
Trickle down kind of gentrification kind of thing of it.
Yeah, it is. Or it's even, well, it's actually even done, it's even more, it's kind of bottom up, you know, because these people have done well, you know? And then when they came to Dublin, they brought the language, they brought the love of GAA, traditional music, all those things that were never strong here when we were kids and are now strong here. Yeah, because it's a different type of person living here.
It's and I don't know. Just when you said that and you're saying it, then in some way I'm kind of like, does that explain Kiltus Kiltory in Monkstown?
All that.
Because
that's all explained by that.
I was always fascinated about how this trad music place existed in the heart of Monkstown like that. It just seems so out of place compared to everything that was around it, you know?
Yeah.
Brilliant, like, don't get me wrong.
Those type of papers are fascinating because
it's
proven by data, like.
Yeah,
you can't argue against that.
But you can't argue against it, and what it does is it's kind of like, it's almost like the culturization of Dún Laoghaire, which has happened over the last 50 years, and that's what I find interesting about economics, is how it explains things to you that you'll walk in the street and say, how did that happen? And then you go and you find it, and you'd be amazed in Ireland. There's lots and lots of researchers beavering away in universities who publishing stuff like this, and it would be a shame. It's a shame because none of it really gets the light of day. You know, you need about 20 of me to be out there telling people that this is out there. You know. I say to John on the podcast, like, come here, another thing I want to tell you. He's like, oh, Macker, what else have you been reading? And
that's like me.
You're like that.
I do that at the end of every podcast with the guest. And he's like, so thanks so much for your time. We're running out of time. And I'm like, no, I just have 3 more questions. Can I just ask you 3 more questions? So I needed to ask it. Because you go on such, we all go, and the whole point of this podcast is to go on tangents.
Yeah.
It's like to recreate a pub setting of having a few points. Do you know what I mean? And you just end up forgetting. And I'm kind of like, I got Dave McWilliams for 45 minutes. I need to ask him these questions.
No, you don't. No, you don't. But so we should probably stop talking about Dún Laoghaire and Kula and whatever for the sake of the listeners, because we're getting very parochial here.
The board is the center of the universe, though. So I mean,
I would not disagree with that. I would not disagree with that. I was trying to explain to my son that, and he was really amazed that I'd played for a season for Tech, right?
Unreal. What year?
82, 81, 80.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah. And not always getting my game, but I was up there. And my dad played for Tech. And Yeah. And I was trying to explain to him that Tech comes from a battle in the First World War. TEK, right? And I was trying to explain to him that all around here, are these little tells, little indications of who the people were and what they were doing and how they were doing it. And he was amazed by that. He was just saying, wow, I can't believe that. And I said, yes. And I said, if you look at like football in the borough, you'll find all these interesting. I was trying to explain to him that when I was a kid, there was maybe 15 teams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Teams in Monkstown Farm alone.
Unbelievable it was.
Yeah. And like, because he was asking me what I thought of Joey's like sucking in all the best players as has been the case. And I was saying that when I was a kid, there was a team called Pierce Rovers who were always much better than Joey's. Always much better.
Yeah.
And I was saying that the team from the Noggin were never really Joey's when I was younger. They were Pierce Rovers on the slopey pitch.
The slopey pitch, yeah. That slopey pitch, many a man met his downfall on that slopey pitch.
Yeah. I was trying to explain to him that one of the great grudge matches was Dalkey versus Pierce, but he was having none of it.
It's mad that you mentioned that though, because like football in the borough is, and in fairness, Keith Kelly, friend of the show, the man behind Jumpers for Goalposts, brilliant initiative. Mero, and correct me if I'm wrong here, he'd done a thing on Pierce Rovers, didn't he?
No, he's still doing it. He's
still in the middle doing it, is he? Like,
tell him I will quote me on getting 40 Shades knocked out of me on that slopey pitch as a kid. On a Tuesday night. Do you remember those summer leagues? Tuesday.
They were brilliant.
Yeah. But
I used to love it because on a Saturday you could go, like some of those teams, like you're talking 10, 15 teams in the whole borough area perhaps.
Yeah.
And some of them had 2-3 teams.
Yeah.
Had two Saturday teams and the senior Sunday team.
Yeah.
Like, I remember going to their
for
games.
Me, because I was always in the second team, so it was great.
Yeah, so you played your matches on a Saturday.
Yeah. Oh yes. Yeah. Sunday free.
Now there's only Tech and Pierce are still going. They've started up again, I think. But like Rutgers Dunleary were brilliant.
But the reason like the Bosco Savio Dunleary, I mean, there's loads of teams that played.
Yeah. Brilliant. Joe's Glass Hill.
Joe's Glass Hill, yeah. Joe's Glass Hill they were doing great for a while.
There was Farm United in Monkstown.
Farm United, that's right,
Rory O'Connor Park, we were a good team. Very, very good team.
They have a team, didn't they?
Had a team. Rory O'Connor Park had a team.
Rory O'Connor Park had a team, a very, very good team. And I'll tell you who played for them, you might know him. Do you know Cowby, the taxi driver? Big fella, Martin Cowp?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Martin. Yeah.
He was a fine footballer and he played for Rory. And he would knock the head off you.
Can you remember who
and Rockford had the team as well, a very good team.
Who were the team that played down in Finton's Park and Dean's Grange? Can you remember? I remember there being football pitches there, and I remember there being a prefab clubhouse there, and my granny lived in.
It was probably Finton's. It was probably a team.
It could have been, yeah. My granny lived down there, and I remember as a kid always seeing it, but like that, even at that stage, like you're talking late 90s kind of thing. Like the goalpost stood, but I never once seen a match there in any of the visits to my granny, and I was asking, who plays here? What is this? This just
again, it's to do. Again, this comes back to economic planning, as we were talking about. Like, if you don't build social corporation houses in the borough, you won't have football teams. This is the simplest thing, right? Because you need young kids, you need young families, so you can see like the disappearance of football clubs in this neck of the woods is explicitly related to the lack of social housing being built for the last 40 years. I mean, this is the way I always look at economics. Like, what does it do when you decide that you're not going to build affordable housing? What it actually means is the fabric of the society changes. It's not that it's destroyed, but it mutates, and you get elderly people living in elderly estates, which get a lot quieter than they used to be on Halloween night. A lot quieter on Halloween night.
So how have successive governments failed in that ideology in terms of if you build, like you going back to your point about Dunleary Main Street, if you build, say, the shops and the houses above it and other accommodation, that will bring in money.
Loads of people. Yeah.
So why aren't they thinking like this? Why are they thinking in the opposite direction?
It's a very funny thing. Like, if you think of Dunleary, the town, right? I'd say one of the biggest travesties ever committed in terms of planning or long-term thinking was to move the Dunleary Art College from just in front of the shopping centre. And then they had an option on Bloomfields to put an art college there instead of the shopping centre. And they went up to Baker's Corner. So there's 3,000, I think, students there. That's a lot of students. Now, had they been still in Bloomfields and it wasn't a shopping centre, the centre of Dún Laoghaire would be full of cafes and bars and kids and vibrancy. As it is, they're up at Baker's, only funneled in and out by the bus. Like, there's no sense of them being there. You know what I mean? So you think, like, to answer your question, Meryl, it's about kind of joining up your thinking and thinking, okay, well, if we move these students, we're going to take out the heart and soul of the town. And what are we going to replace that with? And you say, well, a shopping centre, Bloomfields. You say, yeah, well, Bloomfields is just a car park with a big Tesco's, right? And suddenly then you've changed the whole dynamic of the place. And as you said, then if you're not building social housing in an area where housing is ridiculously expensive and far too expensive, what you do is you gut the whole town of its kind of regenerative dynamism, which is the families bequeathed to other families, bequeathed to other families. So you have, 4 or 5 generations living in the one place. And this would seem to me to be very short-sighted. And I'm not having to go with the council or anything, but I would just think a basic premise would have been to keep families here.
That seems like common sense, though.
Yeah, it does seem like common sense.
The way you've explained it.
It's not that common sense.
I was going to say it's a rare commodity, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I know, kind of, you've said it yourself there. Kind of, we'll move out of the border shortly and that kind of thing. Like, but it's not just Dún Laoghaire though. I mean, you can kind of see that pattern all over Ireland in kind of small towns and the main streets in small towns. And you hear about it constantly. The cultures will say it as well. The main streets decimated and all that kind of thing. So there's a lot in it. But one thing in the border that's been brilliant over the last few years, and just want to hear how you've adjusted to it with COVID and everything else. Dalkey Book Festival, one of the great success stories.
Great. Well, that's you're one there upstairs who you heard roaring at the dog. You've got this poor old Labrador who's getting old and very senile now, and she kind of potters around and gets in everyone's way. And for the first about 4 hours of the day, she's got loads of brownie points because she's the old lab and we all love her. And then by this time of the night now, it's like, Sasha, get out of the anyway. We are going online. We're about to announce a lineup which is really exceptional for this year.
Brilliant.
Last year we couldn't go ahead, and it was dreadful because actually what happened, Danny, is that by last year, by 2019, I think Shan sold like 19,000 tickets for over the weekend, which is a lot of tickets to sell. So it got really, really big, and we got lots of good vibes and lots of good feedback and lots of people enjoying the gigs. And so it was very disappointing the first COVID. Like it was, and had you told me this time last year that we'd be here now still in COVID, I've said, no way.
Yeah.
But what we've done now, I tell you what we've done. We've got a whole, you can get, it's easier to get bigger guests now because you can get them on Zoom and things. And we're going to try and do, later with Jules Holland, that. Yeah. We're going to try and do something like that. We've got a really good venue, one of the Martello Tower in Dalkey. And
brilliant.
I think it'll work really well. And I mean, those sort of things, Danny, they're a joy to do, to see something come to fruition like that and to see people enjoying themselves. And I'm a terrible man for reading books. So, I mean, for me, it's great because it gives me an opportunity to meet writers that I've been fans of and do something which is not doing economics, which is great. So it's been fantastic. And look, we'll be back stronger, I think, next year. And this year will be the 3rd week of June. It'll be online, but I think it's going to be really good.
Brilliant.
Like in fairness, as I said to one of the guests, like I said, it's kind of shite because it's not a festival. Do you know what I mean? Like you can't dress a Zoom call up as being the same vibe as being in a room with 400 or 500 people. But I think it'll be really good.
I was going to say, I'm delighted to hear that you have brought up, because I mean, like that. Look, the experience of being there is that the League of Ireland actually says it, Mero, you can't be being there, kind of thing. But at the same time, it's the next best option right now, isn't it? So I'm delighted to
Yeah,
hear
and you
that
have to
are
keep
still
it
doing
going.
something.
You know, you have to keep these things going. You can't just throw in the towel. And I think a lot of festivals will. I think that's the problem, is that people don't understand really how unbelievably, to use a horrible economics word, asymmetric the impact of the pandemic has been. So in this sense, it's been completely uneven. Like, so a lot of people I know, because I know a lot of comedians and musicians and stand-up entertainers, I know a lot of them, and their world has been totally destroyed by this. And you know, if you're working in, you know, if you've got a job in the public sector, yeah, it's a pain in the arse, because but you know, you're not losing your wage, you're not losing your career. And so I think there's been a huge disparity of experience for a lot of people. Like, we're talking many hundreds of thousands of people work in the sort of what I call the crack economy, which is good crack. So the bars, the restaurants, the hotels, the festivals, the gigs. You know, we've done live gigs in the Workman's Club. All those guys haven't worked. They haven't worked for a year, you know.
It's desperate.
It's really difficult. It's really difficult. So I think that it's great to keep the festival going, but I fear that lots of festivals will not recover from this.
Yeah,
I've been to your festival, I think, every year since it's been on.
Well, that's not really.
And what I love about it, I suppose what I love about it most is that it's only 10 minutes down the road.
Yeah, well, that helps.
But like, one year I went. It was just I went to, on a Sunday, the morning papers in Finnegan's.
Oh yeah, that was a lovely day. Yeah.
It was freaking deadly. Like, I was like, I wanted just to get up and get out of the house, and I was like, right, I'll go down to this. I got tickets anyway. And then shortly after that, at around lunchtime, I went up to the tent and seen the most fascinating conversation with Neil Jordan. It was
brilliant.
just...
Yeah, well,
and he was so grumpy about, like, I only live up the road, I only live 5 minutes away, and I had to get up and do this. But like, he was playing to the crowd, but it was brilliant. Seeing Blind Boy that afternoon.
Blind Boy was
brilliant.
Material as well.
What's that?
Blind Boy asked me, he said, could I read? I said, Blind Boy, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah. Deadly. And then the day before, I was what's the building beside Queen's? The community hall, isn't it?
Yeah, the
town hall.
Yeah.
Emmett Kerwin in conversation with Lynn Rowan.
brilliant. Yeah, brilliant.
That was brilliant. Now, what I loved, and me and my friends commented, what there was a nice little subtle irony there about two working class people on stage in the middle of Dalkey.
Yeah.
And the audience, I don't think, related to some of the stories.
Yeah.
And where you were expecting a warm round of applause or a giggle, it just wasn't happening. And there was me. No, and there's me up the front honking like a pig, like laughing at these things and just thinking it was brilliant. But I just loved that. I just loved that weekend. Like, I can't wait for it to be back next year.
To say so, because I mean, Shan spends a lot of time. Shan is from Belfast, and people from Belfast have a very different view of. Actually, I'll tell you, very different class, very different view of society, less class sensitive than Dubliners, less aware, I think, and she is the one who programs those sort of events and says to me, you know, David, this is great, but I'm hearing a certain type of accent all the time. I'm not hearing Dublin accents. I'm not hearing people from West Dublin. I'm not hearing, like, I mean, she's much more sensitive to this than I am, right? And I think it probably comes from being from a city that carries its baggage very heavily, let's just say. But I think people from Belfast are quite curious about the South, more curious than actually we are, well, maybe than I am in a way. And she notices things. And so she programs the whole thing. So she's the one who gets Neil Jordan, Blind Boy, and Emmett and Lynn together and says, that'll work. Don't worry. I said,
no. In the town hall, it definitely worked. I did feel like when it was over, I felt the audience was definitely enlightened, and it was because Lynn was talking about her book and her upbringing and some of the stuff that she went through.
Mad stuff.
And yeah, mad stuff. And I did get the sense that people were enlightened, because that was evident in the queue to get your book signed straight after it, because a lot of them were there to get their book signed and in such admiration of Lynn. So like I just felt there was moments funny saying, it's class that we're in Dalkey town hall here with two
these guys don't get
heroes.
This. Yeah. Well, it's it's a joy to put on. The fact that it kind of gives you permission to do things you wouldn't otherwise do, and I just hope that we'll get over this one. But I hope other festivals, because we were 10 years running, and when you're 10 years running, you've got
10 years. My God,
yeah, it's a long time. But you have the stamina and you have the confidence to say, look, we can get through a year or two, right?
Yeah.
But if you're a small festival, you're only starting up. COVID has been really difficult for people, and also, as you know, it's like anything, you can lose your own momentum doing gigs. What the three of us do, podcasts and all this. It takes a certain amount of get up and go, and you need to get a little bit of feedback from your audience to make it all worthwhile. And I think that, again, I come back to this, the people that make decisions about locking down and all that, I know that they do it because they're doctors and whatever, but I'm not sure they get the totality of the impact on people's lives. And I'm not sure they understand quite how much of people's personalities, characters, and personal effort are involved in the performance. And shutting down the performance it's not just somebody's income, it shuts down them as people. And that can
especially not giving support with that, the arts sector, like.
Yeah, no. It's just something I'm aware of, maybe more than others, because I've chosen over the years to hang around with those type of people.
Well, it's as I said, delighted that you guys are going online with it, and pass on our best to Shan as well, because
I will.
As I said, it's been a massive success story. It's a highlight in a board of social calendar every year. So long may it continue.
And if she ever wants to book us as hosts, any of those Q&As, we're always there for you.
That's Mero negotiates a mean fee. That's all I'll say.
Listen. You'll have Belfast versus the Brack. It'll be quite a sight.
Speaking of just Belfast there, conversation amongst friends over the last 2 years, given with the Brexit stuff and all, conversation always seems to lead to 6 counties in terms of unification. It always ends up, but a lot of the friends in my circle would probably say, we couldn't do it because we couldn't afford it. Look at the state of our economy. How could we afford 6 counties? What can we afford it? Could we afford it?
We could afford. I think money will be the least of our worries.
Really?
Yeah, we could afford it really easy. I mean, this country is, this is a big economy in comparison. Like, just give you the numbers. The economy here is about 300 million, maybe less, given this jiggery pokery going on. But the size of the southern economies, let's say above 300 million euros. So that's the size of the GDP per year, right? The northern economy is about 50 million, so it's very small. The maths are very simple. The Brits give them about a subvention of about 11 million, or billions, billions. I'm talking millions, billions. The Brits give them a subvention of about 11 billion a year. That would be about 3 or 4% of our GDP. So we could afford it in the morning. Like, we're spending more in 2 months on COVID than we'd be spending in Northern Ireland, right?
Really?
Yeah. So it's not the issue is what do you do with 1 million people who don't want to live in your country? What do you actually do with them? Do you coerce them? Yeah, you probably could. Do you try and persuade them? That would be much more beneficial long term. What happens to the loyalist population? There could be at least 200,000 of them. I always describe it that the mainstream of unionism is what I would call garden centre unionists, right? Because I know them very well. And these are people who go and talk about hydrangeas and, geraniums. That's their currency, right? And then you have what I would call the Windsor Park Unionists, who are the Northern Irish football team supporters. And they don't want much to do with us at all. I remember when my son, who's now 18, was 12, when we qualified, no, he's about 10, we qualified for the Polish European Championship. Remember that?
2012, yeah.
And he and his little cousin from Belfast, from East Belfast, where my wife is from, Ollie, and they were up on Christmas Day, and the two of them were planning that what the two kids would do was that they were going to get a camper van, and the two dads were going to drive it, right? And we'd support the North, and they'd support the South, and we'd go as a unified Irish camper van, right? Two little kids, which is a lovely idea. And my brother-in-law, Conrad, said that will not be happening. And I said, why? He says, because we're prods, but they're crazy prods. He's referring to the hardcore East Belfast guys. He says, prods like us are fine. He says, the crazy prods want nothing to DG. And he was right. You know? And so the two little boys had to just say, oh, okay. And what the interesting thing is, and the terrible thing is, they had no idea, the two little kids, that there was any difference. But as far as they were concerned, they were going to support Ireland. We were going to get the camper van. They'd be the Northern Irish, we'd be the Republic, and we'd all go together. And I think, you know, unfortunately, the issue is ethnic. It's not financial or economic, you know. And I'm not sure what you do with a population of people who actually prefer to be Scottish than Irish, because ultimately that's what they want to be, you know. And I'm not sure you can. You know, you saw how they kicked off there last week. It would be quite violent. I think it would be quite violent, and I don't know how you can persuade them. You know, I really don't.
Yeah.
But then again, you can't stop the progressive, democratic, and demographic right of Northern nationalists just because you're afraid of loyalism. Because that sort of, in a way, disenfranchises the nationalists, because you're saying, well, it doesn't matter if you guys are 52% or 55% and we have the money and we could do that because these guys over here will kick off and we don't want that. So it's going to be very, I think it's going to happen, the United Ireland. And I think it's going to happen quicker than we think.
Well,
what do you mean quicker than you think? Just what timeline?
There's a dynamic in these things. Like once the population tips over to the nationalist side, then the union only exists if it's given permission to exist by nationalists, which is a very odd thing to think about, right? So then the unionists will have to be on their best behavior for a long time in order not to insult nationalists, to get nationalists. So I think once that changes, then you'll find the Alliance Party, which could benefit hugely from this change in the DUP, which is Arlene Foster going. As I said today on Twitter, the DUP have a choice. Are they going to go for an F.W. de Klerk or a Eugene Terre Blanche, referring to South Africa, you know, that South Africans went for F.W. de Klerk, but they could have gone from Terre Blanche, who was part of that Afrikaner resistance movement, who was a white supremacist. So I don't know, but I think that when things tip over, they tip over quickly. And there's a very large section of, again, I come back to the what I would call the garden centre unionists, who I think would be quite happy. They're the sort of people who go and watch the rugby here. They've no problem. They go to Donegal around the 12th of July. You'll hear their accents all around town all the time. They come down to gigs here all the time. They're very much living in an all-Ireland world. Very much.
They only get out on July the 12th because they don't want to see your tweet where you're born McAllister. That I retweet every year.
That was good, wasn't it?
What was it like in the studio?
Wait, Jim Allister. I'd never seen the fella before. I was more a fear of Jerry Kelly, the raw lad beside me. And, if you're going to be afraid of someone, you'd be afraid of a provo more, you'd be afraid of your man. But he was kind of getting hot under the collar, and he was, and then of course it was the last question, and you could see it was a young fella asked a question out of badness, and your man kicked off. I started talking about this grubby battle in a foreign country. And then I went around the house, and it came to me last, and I looked at, I think it was Mark Carruthers, who's the compere, the MC.
BBC, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, he's a good lad. He's really, really a good, very good presenter. And I kind of looked at him. He looked at me and he says, like, "You're on your own here, mate." And I said, "Look, Mark, it's unusual for a Southerner. This isn't it's not my scrap, But it does seem very weird to me that Jim is so infuriated by celebrating a grubby battle that happened in a foreign country, because he already does that." He said, "How do you mean?" This is the Battle of the Boyne. It happened in our country, like, this is the country you hate. And then he goes on. Then it was quite funny. The clip was great, but what actually happened was, and then he started going on about Ireland in 1690, and I said, well, the Act of Union happened in 1707 between Scotland. It happened in 1801 between Ireland. I mean, there was no union, right? There were no unionists then. You didn't exist, right? But you'd be amazed how little they know about their own history, and they clearly know very little about geography as well. So
yeah.
But look, I'm an odd character, Mero. I feel sorry for loyalism. I feel sorry for any group of people who feel so isolated and let down. And I've always said that anger is the emotion of the truly hopeless, right? That only hopeless people who have no way out get angry. And you see that in arguments, right? When people get very angry, it's because it's the kind of counterpoint. It's the emotion that comes to mind and comes to the surface when people have nothing else. And so when I see those loyalist kids, throwing petrol bombs, whatever it is, and I see them being egged on, and I contrast them with the nationalist kids, with the Sinn Féin kids, right? Who are, I very recently I was out at a reading by a friend of mine called Philippe Sands, who wrote a book called East-West Street about the Holocaust, and it was in Belfast. And I bumped into a mate of mine, and it was a pretty highbrow thing, in fairness, right? And the guy I bumped into was the son of, he'll remain nameless, the son of a member of the Army Council, the IRA Army Council. And I've known him, and he's a very clever guy. And we had a chat, and Shan was there, and Shan was like, "Jesus Christ, let's come on, we go for a drink." And we did. So they all talked to each other. Shan being from East Belfast, him being from West Belfast, and they got on like a house on fire. But I came back to my mother-in-law, and Shan was saying, "Oh, we went for a drink with a friend of David's," and Philippe, who's this very brilliant lawyer fella, and Shan described who the geezer was and who his dad was. And Shan's mother knew exactly who he was, right? And Shan's mother, who's now in her 80s, she said, that's the thing. He says, their kids are going to discussions about the Holocaust by human rights lawyers. And see, the kids of our lot are dealing coke. And that's the difference. And I thought, Jesus, she's right.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening. So the kids of the provosts are educated, and their grandkids are unbelievably educated, and they're getting on. The kids of the loyalist people, they're out throwing petrol bombs, dealing coke, and getting into trouble because nobody's saying to them, there is a way out here. There's education, there's politics, there's human rights, there's all that stuff you can get involved in. And so I feel sorry for them because they're lost. And we are going to have to take them by the hand at some stage because they live on the same island. And we've got to get our heads around that.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's it, yeah. As I said, it looks like it's going to happen sooner or later. I don't know, the Arlene Foster situation, I think, probably accelerates it. I'm not too optimistic for the DUP and their long-term success at all now.
No, am I. But, we need to get find our inner Mandela down here, right? That we've got to understand that we are the people that can help them to help themselves, right? We are the people that can assuage that. The English will eventually shaft them, right? We know that, right? And they'll be left here with us. And it's like having a kid that needs a little bit of direction. And as we know, the best thing you can do with a kid who's feeling angry is not to shout at them, but to put your arms around them and say, it'll be okay. I've got you. And I've got a way forward for you, and we've got to start thinking like that, which is a big leap for us. But I think we can do it. I think we can do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. On that note, David, on a positive and encouraging note for the future, then, look, thank you so much for your time. We've taken up more than enough of it.
This is the gig of the week for me. This is brilliant.
Yes.
This is my favourite gig. This is fantastic.
Well, hopefully...
Did you ever get round to writing that article about how the League of Ireland could make money?
No, but I will. Let's wait till this crowd's back.
Right. I'm going to hold you to that now.
Yeah, no, definitely, Mara, we'll do it. Of course it can make money. Of course it can.
Yes.
Love it.
Okay. Listen, gents, it's been a pleasure.
David, thank you so much. And look, all the best with the Digital Docu Book Festival.
Great stuff. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Hopefully next time we do this, you'll be able to zip up on your Vesta.
Live and dangerous. Live and dangerous as Thin Lizzy once recorded.
Absolutely. Love it. David, thanks so much. Take care, man. Thank you.
Good luck, man. Bye-bye.
He's a very wise man.
Yeah, I love having conversations with him. He's deadly.
He's the perfect bloke for going on just weavy wobbly tangents and just kind of going, do you know what's mad? And he'll be like, I'll tell you why that's mad though. And then he unleashes this realm of data and facts and amazingness, and you're like, my God, if I had a point in front of me right now, I could sit there and listen to you waffling.
I know, that's it.
Love it. He's absolutely brilliant. And if we had more economists like him, the world would be a better place. I
don't mean this to be derogatory against other economists, but is there any more out there that simplify things as well as David does? Actually, I think Aidan O'Regan is a good one. He's an associate professor, isn't he?
I'm not sure what his qualifications are, but I've heard him talk about things.
I don't know. Is his forte economics?
No idea, but I've heard him talk about things before, and I've quite liked the sound of him. Again, he does that thing where he makes it understandable. Actually, Brianna Parkins, who we had in the podcast last week, she studied economics, and she explains economics using squishies and cans of beer.
Yeah,
I mean,
Aidan O'Regan might be a good guest for the podcast.
Quite possibly, yeah. That's a production meeting we'll have off air. People don't even know that.
Sorry, I was thinking out loud.
It's quite all right. But yeah, there's a need for things that are seen as complex and complicated to be explained in a way that is accessible to the man on the street and to the woman in the cafe and to the kid in school and all those things. It just make it accessible. Don't try and it's the same. You know, everyone knows somebody in work who, when they write an email, they write it in a way that's kind of like, if I was having this conversation with you face to face, there's not a fucking chance that's the verbiage and that's the word that you'd use. There's just you wouldn't.
It's nonsense.
Come on. Anyway, that's it. That's our episode this week, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. If you want to listen to any of our previous podcast episodes, you can search WTS Pod on any podcast provider. I use Podcast Republic. Danny use Apple Podcasts. You can get it on Stitcher, Podbean. Go to WTSpod.com. We're on Twitter at WTSPod. He's at Banjo Murray on Instagram and Twitter. I'm at Merrigan Mania on Instagram and Twitter. And until next week, Danny.
Clear eyes.
Full hearts. Can't lose. Dublin is and
That's been beeped out. Good night. God bless, folks.